I had been waiting to make this phone call for 93 days. I made it at 6:02 on a Saturday morning in October. I was standing at a brand new steel gate, the only road in or out of Elk Ridge Estates. The gate was 12 feet wide, 7 feet tall, bolted into concrete piers my son had poured the night before. I had 3 padlocks on it. Sheriff Coy Driscoll was standing 6 feet to my left. My son Russ was standing 6 feet to my right. The phone in my hand was connected to the Park County Clerk's office, where a friend of mine was waiting on the other end of the line. When she said, "Recorded, Mr. Tanner," the only way in or out of 50 luxury homes was closed forever, and the HOA president who had spent 2 years calling me a redneck did not yet know it. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. My name is Bo Tanner. I have ranched 4,400 acres of Paradise Valley in Park County, Montana, since my father handed me the saddle in 1986. He'd taken it from his father in 1962. His father had bought the original quarter section from a railroad surveyor in 1923, a man named Truman Yost, who had been laid off by the Northern Pacific and didn't want to look at the mountains anymore. The original survey is still hanging in the front room of our ranch house. We run a small cow-calf operation, 212 head of Black Angus. I have my son Russ working the ranch with me. He's 33. He came back home from a job in Bozeman the year his grandfather started slowing down. My daughter Joanna is 29 and a nurse at Bozeman Health. My wife Hattie is 59 and a substitute teacher at Livingston Elementary. We've been married 38 years. My father, Cal Tanner, died last April, 81 years old, in his sleep, in his own bed, with the spring snow falling outside the window. He had refused to sell the back 80 to a Bozeman developer named Calvin Drayton in 2017. He told Drayton on our front porch, in a voice you could have heard in 3 counties, "Mister, my grandfather walked that land. My daddy died on it. My boy will ride it. You can offer me the moon, and I'll still tell you no." Drayton left. Drayton never came back to talk to my father again. After Cal died, I kept his coffee mug on the porch table. I sat in his rocking chair most mornings before sunrise. I had not moved a thing in his closet. The same 6 work shirts still hung on the same 6 wooden hangers. The same brown leather belt still curled on the same nail. The same battered Stetson still sat on the same shelf above the door. Hattie understood. Russ understood. Joanna understood. Everyone in Park County understood. Cal Tanner had been the kind of man you do not pack away in a hurry. You take your time. You wait until the land tells you it is time. The land had not told me yet. Drayton came back 6 months after my father's funeral. He stood on our porch in a Patagonia vest and a pair of soft leather boots that had never seen a horse. He offered me $1.4 million for the back 80. I told him the same thing Cal had told him. He left. Then he did the only thing left to him. He bought a different 80 from a neighbor named Pete Schaefer, who had retired to Florida and didn't care what happened to the land. Drayton subdivided it into 50 luxury parcels. He marketed it nationwide. He sold every lot. By the spring of 2023, 50 Greenwich and Manhattan and San Francisco buyers had moved into a gated community called Elk Ridge Estates, and the only road in or out of their cul-de-sac ran 3.2 miles across my family ranch. The road is called Whiskey Creek Trail. It crosses a creek my grandfather named for a bottle he'd lost in it during the spring melt of 1924. It crosses pasture my father fenced in 1969 with his own 2 hands and the help of a Crow ranch hand named Earl Two Bear, who had ridden for Tanner Cross for 21 years. It crosses a hayfield my son and I cut every August. It has been Tanner land since 1923. There is no recorded easement on it. There never has been. My father had granted what Montana law calls a permissive license, a verbal courtesy, to a single neighbor in 1984, when that neighbor needed access for a small lodge that closed in 1997. The license was never written down. It was never paid for. Under Montana Code Annotated Section 7017-109, permissive use does not create an easement, not in 5 years, not in 50. The Montana Supreme Court had affirmed that principle 3 times in the last 30 years. I knew because I had read all 3 opinions on the porch the week my father died. The new residents of Elk Ridge Estates did not know any of this. The developer who sold them their homes did not tell them. The HOA president, a 48-year-old transplant from Greenwich, Connecticut, named Stacy McAllister, decided, in her second year on the board, that she was going to fix that little inconvenience by making my private road into a public one. That was the spring she started picking the wrong fight. Stacy McAllister walked up my driveway for the first time on the second Tuesday in April. She was wearing a Patagonia softshell over a white turtleneck, pearl earrings, and a pair of sorrel boots that had never crossed a real pasture. Her platinum hair was pulled back in a tight clip. She knocked on my screen door at 9:20 in the morning while I was finishing my second cup of coffee. Mr. Tanner. Mrs. McAllister. Stacy, please. Mrs. McAllister. The smile flickered for half a second and recovered. I wanted to discuss something with you. The road that runs through your property to our community. We have 50 families now. School buses, delivery vehicles, postal trucks, contractors. As HOA president, I think it's time we formalize the access arrangement. Formalize? Yes, a recorded easement. We would pay you, of course. The HOA has authorized a one-time payment of $50,000. I looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. Ma'am, that road is my road. The Tanner family has owned it since 1923. We have permitted people to use it as a courtesy. We have never given a recorded easement to anyone. Mr. Tanner, with respect, the road has been used continuously for years. There is a legal doctrine called prescriptive easement. Mrs. McAllister, with respect, I know what a prescriptive easement is. I was on the Park County Commission for 4 years. The use of that road has been permissive. Under Section 7017-109, permissive use does not create a prescriptive easement. It never has. It never will. Her smile tightened. Mr. Tanner, we would like to come to a reasonable accommodation. Mrs. McAllister, I have allowed your residents to drive across my land for 4 years without charging you a dime. That is the reasonable accommodation. It can continue, on my terms, for as long as I choose, or it can stop, on my terms, when I choose. I let her hear that sentence twice. She closed the folder. She walked back to her white Lexus. She drove off. 4 days later, the HOA's monthly newsletter went out. The lead article was titled, "Working Toward a Permanent Solution to Our Access Concerns." My name appeared 3 times. The word obstinate appeared twice. The word redneck appeared once, in a quoted comment from an anonymous resident who, I would later learn, was Stacy McAllister herself. Hattie read the newsletter at the kitchen table that night and laughed. Bo, redneck. Yes, ma'am. She knows you were on the county commission for 4 years. She does not believe it. She thinks I spent 4 years on a tractor. You spent some of them on a tractor. Most of them in a courthouse. Hattie kissed the top of my head and put the newsletter in the kindling box by the wood stove. A week later, I drove down Whiskey Creek Trail to check fence and found a wooden archway built across my road at the entrance. 8 feet tall, 12 feet wide. A hand-painted sign read, Elk Ridge Estates, private community access, authorized vehicles only. I drove home. I came back with my pickup, a chainsaw, and Russ. Russ took one look at the archway and laughed. The short, hard laugh his grandfather used to laugh when he was about to say something polite. We cut the archway down to its base in 14 minutes. The chainsaw was a steel that had been my father's. The cedar planks of the archway smelled like a craft store. We hauled the lumber to my burn pile by the equipment barn and left it. I drove back to the road entrance with a small wooden post and a hand-painted sign of my own. I had cut the post from a section of lodgepole pine that had come down in a storm in 2022. I had painted the sign in the equipment barn in less than 30 minutes. The paint was the same red barn paint my father had used for 50 years. The sign said, "This is my road. B. Tanner." That was the message. That was all of it. Stacy McAllister called the Park County Sheriff's Office at 4:07 that afternoon. She told the dispatcher that the rancher next door had violently destroyed the HOA's community signage and was actively obstructing emergency vehicle access to 50 luxury homes. She used the word violent 3 times. Sheriff Coy Driscoll arrived at my porch at 4:50 in his pickup truck. Coy and I have known each other since 1971. He climbed the porch steps. He sat down in Cal's rocking chair without asking. Bo. Coy. Mrs. McAllister says you destroyed HOA property and obstructed her access. I removed a structure from my own road. That's what I figured. You got the deed handy? I went inside. I came back with the 1923 deed, the 1962 transfer, the 1986 transfer to me, and 4 years of property tax statements. Coy read them slowly. He drank a glass of buttermilk Hattie brought without being asked. Bo, this is your road. There is no question about it. There never was. I'll go talk to Mrs. McAllister. Coy, thank you. You hear from the developer yet? Drayton stopped coming around when Cal told him no. He's been quiet. He's not going to stay quiet. I know. Coy stood up. He set the empty glass on the porch railing. Bo, I'm sorry about your father. I miss him too. He drove off in the direction of Elk Ridge Estates. I never asked him what he said to Stacy. He never told me. But the next day, the HOA's Facebook page posted a long, aggrieved statement about the difficulty of working with a county sheriff department that does not respect the safety concerns of new residents. Coy's photograph was attached. 3 days later, the post was quietly deleted. On the second Tuesday of May, Brett McAllister arrived at my porch in a black Range Rover. Brett was a tall man, 51 years old, with a soft handshake and the easy, false friendly smile of a man who had spent 22 years convincing other men's pension funds to give him their money. He had retired from a Greenwich hedge fund in 2020. He sat down in the chair Coy had sat in. He did not ask permission. Bo. Mr. McAllister. Brett, please. Mr. McAllister. Bo, I want to come at this man to man. My wife is stubborn. I get it. I am authorized by the HOA, and out of my own pocket if it has to be that way, to offer you $100,000 for a recorded easement on Whiskey Creek Trail. Permanent, filed with the county. We never have to talk again. I let the silence settle. Mr. McAllister, there is not a number you can offer me that buys this road. There is no version of this conversation where I sell my family's land. I would appreciate if you did not come back. His smile slipped half an inch. He stood up. He set a business card on the porch railing. Bo, you can be a difficult man, or you can be a wealthy one. There is no third option here. I picked up the business card. I read it. I set it back down. Mr. McAllister, I prefer to be the man my father raised. He left. I burned the business card in the wood stove that night without reading the back of it. Hattie watched me do it from the kitchen table. She did not say anything. She made me a fresh cup of coffee. The wood stove popped twice and then settled. That was the night I understood the McAllisters were not going to leave this alone. People with money do not understand no. They understand how much. When you tell them that there is no number, what they hear is that you are negotiating. It takes them a long time, sometimes years, sometimes decades, to learn that the rest of the world is not for sale. Brett McAllister had not yet had that lesson. He was about to. Stacy McAllister's next move came at 8:06 on a Wednesday morning, in the form of a 911 call. She told the dispatcher that the unstable rancher next door had threatened my child at the school bus stop. She said I had approached aggressively, made remarks about her child's safety, and gestured in a manner suggesting potential violence. The bus stop in question was at the entrance to Elk Ridge Estates. At 8:06 on a Wednesday morning, I was 3 miles away on the north pasture, riding fence with Russ. We had a witness in every direction. Sheriff Driscoll responded to the call himself. He pulled the bus stop camera footage from the county school district by lunch. The footage showed Stacy's son standing at the bus stop alone for 90 seconds, getting on the school bus and leaving. No rancher, no truck, no exchange. Coy issued Stacy a formal warning under Montana's false report statute. She did not apologize. She posted a long Facebook entry that afternoon titled, "When Small-Town Sheriffs Refuse to Protect Children." Coy's photograph appeared in the post again. It was deleted by a board vote of 3-2 at the next HOA meeting. Stacy walked out of that meeting in tears, telling the board secretary that this community is being terrorized by an old white man with a personal grudge. I do not know what color she thought I was. I knew what color Cal had been. I knew what color my mother had been. I knew what color my children were. Stacy McAllister was 48 years old, born in Darien, Connecticut, with 2 Ivy League degrees, married to a man whose net worth was somewhere north of $40 million. I felt, on her behalf, the small, uncomfortable thing a man feels when a woman who has been given everything in life decides she is the victim of someone who has not. The next week, on a Thursday afternoon in late May, Holt Pemberton called me from his office in Livingston. Holt has been my surveyor since 1994. He inherited the practice from his father, who had surveyed for my father, who had surveyed for my grandfather. He still uses a steel tape on small jobs. "Bo, can you come in tomorrow with everything? Every deed, every transfer, every tax record on the Tanner Cross going back to 1923. Holt, what did you find? I'd rather show you in person. Bring Hattie if you want. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, looking at the photograph of my father on the bookshelf. Cal Tanner had been a man of few words. He had said one thing to me, the week before he died, that I had carried with me ever since. "Boy, sometimes the land protects itself. You just have to be standing still long enough to notice." I had not understood the sentence at the time. I had thought he was tired. I drove to Holt Pemberton's office at 9:45 the next morning, with a box of deeds in the passenger seat and Hattie in the cab beside me. That morning, Holt Pemberton showed me what my father had meant. Holt's office sat above a feed store on Main Street in Livingston, in a brick building that had been a saddle shop in 1908. He had 3 large plotters running when we walked in. He had a thermos of coffee, a half-eaten sandwich, and 3 printouts spread across his drafting table. "Sit down, Bo. Hattie." We sat. I started by running a routine resurvey of the Drayton parcel last month for a water permit. The boundaries on the original 2017 sale did not close cleanly. I thought it was rounding error. I ran it again. I pulled the township section maps from the Bureau of Land Management. I pulled your grandfather's original deed and overlaid it on the developer's survey, Bo. The Drayton parcel, the 80 acres that became Elk Ridge Estates, is short by 312 feet on the western boundary. Short. The original surveyor put the line 312 feet east of where it actually is. That means 13 of the 50 houses in Elk Ridge Estates are partially on Tanner land, some by 10 feet, some by 60. The McAllister house sits 87 feet onto your western pasture. I did not say anything. Hattie put her hand on my knee. It gets worse. The original surveyor on that 2017 sale was a man named Lester Greaves. I pulled his licensure. He is not a licensed Montana surveyor. He has never been. He holds a forged license issued out of a strip mall in Salt Lake City. Calvin Drayton paid him $187,000 for the survey work. The payment went through a Cayman Islands shell company. The receiving account was a checking account in Lester Greaves's wife's maiden name. Hattie said, very quietly, "Holt, how do you know that?" Holt's face moved a quarter of an inch. He looked at me. "Bo, I have a friend at the Montana AG's office. I have known her 31 years. I called her last week. She pulled the records. She is on her way to Bozeman as we speak." He turned over the last printout on the drafting table. "And one more thing. Whiskey Creek Trail, your road, the license your father granted in 1984 to the lodge. It was permissive only, verbal. There is nothing recorded. Under Montana Code Section 7017-109, you can revoke that license at any time. The developer's title insurance does not cover the road. The HOA does not have a deeded easement. The 50 homes in Elk Ridge Estates have no legal right to cross your land. They never did." I sat at Holt Pemberton's desk for a long minute. I felt the small, uncomfortable thing a man feels when his father, dead 8 months, reaches across the grave and hands him exactly what he needs. Cal had refused to sell the back 80 in 2017. He had been right to refuse. He had been right for reasons he did not even know. The developer who tried to buy from him would later go on to commit a real property fraud worth millions of dollars on land that adjoined ours. The Tanner family had been protected by the same kind of stubborn rural patience that built the ranch in 1923. The land had been waiting. So had my father. Hattie squeezed my knee. There were tears in her eyes she did not let fall. I said, "Holt, get me 3 certified survey copies. I need to make a phone call." Roy Brunsdale has been my family's attorney since 1990. He is a 66-year-old country lawyer who keeps 3 sharpened pencils in his shirt pocket and a Bible in the top drawer of his desk. When I called him at 10:47 that morning from Holt Pemberton's drafting table, he did not ask me to repeat anything. "Bo, get to my office by 1. Bring Holt. Bring the surveys. Bring Hattie if you want. I'll have Faye Sarnow on the phone by the time you sit down." Faye Sarnow was the senior investigator at the Montana Attorney General's Real Estate Fraud Division. She had once put a Bozeman developer in federal prison for 9 years for a similar scheme. She had grown up on a small ranch outside Big Timber. She had been waiting for Calvin Drayton for 6 years. We sat down at Roy's conference table at 1:05. Faye was on speakerphone. Holt laid out his survey. Roy laid out a 1-page case outline he had drafted between my call and our arrival. The plan was 4 pieces. Piece 1, a formal notice of revocation of permissive license, drafted by Roy, filed with the Park County clerk and recorder, hand-delivered to every household at Elk Ridge Estates by certified mail, with a 30-day notice period. Piece 2, a formal notice of private road closure under Montana Code Annotated Section 714-2622, filed simultaneously, taking effect at the end of the 30-day notice. Piece 3, a quiet title action filed in Park County District Court, asserting Tanner ownership of the disputed 312-foot western strip, naming Calvin Drayton, Drayton Holdings LLC, and the 13 affected homeowners as defendants. We notified the homeowners that we intended no personal action against them, only against the developer. Piece 4, a coordinated federal-state action by the AG's office and the FBI, targeting Calvin Drayton, Lester Greaves, Brett McAllister, and Stacy McAllister for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real property theft, forgery, and bribery of a public official. The McAllisters had bribed a Park County building inspector named Curtis Vetterly with $24,000 to look the other way during construction. Vetterly had been on Faye's quiet watch list for 2 years. The federal arrests would happen at sunrise on the morning the road closure took effect. The 30-day notice would expire on Saturday, October 12th, at 6 a.m. Roy looked at me across the conference table. "Bo, are you ready?" I thought about Cal's empty rocking chair on the porch. I thought about Hattie's hand on my knee at Holt's drafting table. I thought about 140 pasture acres my grandfather had fenced in 1969, that 13 luxury homes were sitting on without paying. I thought about my father, in his sleep, in the spring snow. "Roy, I'm ready." We filed the notice of revocation that afternoon. We mailed certified copies to 50 households on Friday morning. By the following Monday, every household in Elk Ridge Estates had received written notice that Whiskey Creek Trail would be closed in 30 days under Montana state law. Stacy McAllister's first response was an HOA Facebook post titled, "Aggressive Legal Tactics from Hostile Neighbor, Emergency Board Meeting Tuesday." Brett's first response was a phone call to a Manhattan law firm that charged him $1,800 an hour to write him a 6-page memo concluding, in lawyerly language, that he was out of legal options. Calvin Drayton's first response was to fly to Aspen for what his secretary described as a long-planned vacation. Lester Greaves' first response was to drive to a sporting goods store in Salt Lake City and try to purchase a one-way ticket on a small commuter flight to Tijuana. The TSA flagged his attempt within 20 minutes. None of them knew what we knew. I ordered the steel gate from a fabricator in Bozeman the same Friday afternoon, 12 feet wide, 7 feet tall, 3 padlocks, bolted to concrete piers Russ would pour the night before installation. Hattie made a pot of chili that Friday night, and the whole family ate together at the kitchen table. We did not talk about the road. We talked about Cal. We laughed for the first time in 8 months. When everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone on the porch with Cal's coffee mug. The October air smelled like pine and dry hay, and the slow, patient ground of a county my family had ranched since 1923. Stacy McAllister did not respond well to the certified mail. The HOA Facebook post on Saturday morning was titled "An Open Letter to the Tanner Family." It ran 28 paragraphs. It called me, by name, a bitter old white man, a domestic terrorist, a rural extremist, and the kind of small-town tyrant who gives Montana a bad name. It implied that I had abused Hattie. It implied Russ had a drug problem. It referenced Joanna by name and noted that she works at a public hospital and should be careful about her professional reputation. The post received 18 comments from HOA residents. 14 of them asked Stacy to take the post down. One came from a 66-year-old former school teacher named Marjorie Pinella, who lived in the smallest house in Elk Ridge Estates and had voted against Stacy in the last HOA election. Marjorie wrote, "Stacy, this is wrong. The man has a deed. We did not. Take this down." Stacy did not take it down. She deleted Marjorie's comment. Marjorie printed a screenshot. Marjorie drove out to my ranch the following Wednesday with a manila folder and a pan of apple pie. I let her in. Hattie poured her a glass of buttermilk. Marjorie sat at our kitchen table for 2 hours and told us everything she knew. Stacy had bribed the building inspector. Stacy had threatened 3 previous board members into resigning. Stacy had been collecting HOA dues she diverted into a personal Schwab account. Brett had paid Lester Greaves a consulting fee in 2017. Brett's own money, not Drayton's, to fudge the survey. Stacy and Brett had known the 50 homes were built on disputed land since the day they bought theirs. When Marjorie finished, Hattie reached across the table and held her hand. Marjorie cried. We let her cry. She gave us the folder. The folder contained 6 months of HOA board meeting recordings she had been making in secret on her phone, 11 screenshots of Stacy's deleted Facebook posts, and a copy of a bank statement Stacy had accidentally emailed to the wrong distribution list. The bank statement showed 17 unauthorized HOA dues withdrawals into Stacy's personal account totaling $41,000. I gave the folder to Roy Brunsdale the next morning. Roy gave it to Faye Sarno by noon. By Friday, 6 days before the road closure was set to take effect, the federal investigation had quietly tripled in size. Bribery, embezzlement, wire fraud, false statements to FBI agents. 8 federal charges on the table, with Stacy's name on most of them. She did not know. Brett did not know. Drayton, sunning himself in Aspen, did not know. On Thursday evening, the day before Russ was scheduled to pour the gate piers, Stacy McAllister called my wife at the elementary school where Hattie's substitute taught. She told the school secretary that Mrs. Tanner needs to be informed there is a domestic situation at her home. The secretary called Hattie out of a 3rd grade classroom. Hattie listened to 37 seconds of screaming. Then she very calmly said, "Mrs. McAllister, I am recording this call on the school's PBX system. Every word will be in your indictment by Monday morning. Have a nice day." She hung up. She walked back to her 3rd grade classroom and finished the unit on Montana history. The unit, as it happened, was on the Homestead Act of 1862 and the families who had walked west to claim 160 acres of nothing because nothing, properly worked, was the only thing that lasted. The 3rd graders did not yet understand the irony. Hattie did. She taught the lesson with a small, steady smile she did not let leave her face. That night she handed me the recording on a USB drive over dinner. Hattie. "Bo, don't say a word. Just eat your pot roast." I did. Russ poured the concrete piers for the gate on Friday at sundown. I held the level. He worked the trowel. The piers cured under a tarp through the night. The temperature dropped to 28 degrees. Russ slept in the equipment barn to keep an eye on them. By 5 a.m. the whole family was up. Joanna had driven in from Bozeman the night before. Hattie was at the kitchen counter, packing sandwiches and butcher paper. Russ was loading the steel gate onto the flatbed trailer behind the pickup. The October sky over Paradise Valley was a deep, cold blue, and the breath of every cow in the lower pasture made a small white cloud in the dark. Sheriff Coy Driscoll pulled into the yard at 5:15 with 2 deputies and 2 cruisers behind him. Faye Sarnow pulled in at 5:20 in an unmarked AG sedan. Roy Brunsdale arrived at 5:28 in his 1998 Ford F-150. He was wearing a wool coat and carrying a leather briefcase. He climbed into the cab of my pickup without asking. "Bo." "Roy." "I have been waiting on this case for 35 years. "I know it, Roy." Joanna kissed me on the cheek. Hattie squeezed my hand once. Russ climbed into his own pickup with the gate on the flatbed. I climbed into mine. We drove the 3.2 miles down Whiskey Creek Trail to the entrance at the highway. We arrived at the road junction at 5:45. There was a layer of frost on the cattle guard. The fence posts were silver in the moonlight. The valley to the east was beginning to glow with the first edge of dawn, the kind of pale, slow lift Cal Tanner had described to me once as the only proof we get that the day is going to come, even if you don't want it to. Russ and I unloaded the steel gate. The two deputies helped. We dropped the gate frame onto the cured concrete piers. We bolted it in place. Russ tightened every bolt twice. The gate hung perfectly. I hung the 3 padlocks one by one. Each one clicked. The first padlock was Cal's old combination lock from his tool chest. He had bought it at a hardware store in Livingston in 1971. He had used it for 53 years on the equipment barn door, on the tack shed, on the cabin he and my mother had built up at the back 40 during the summer she was pregnant with me. The combination was my mother's birthday backward. I had carried it in my truck since the day he died. I had not known what I was going to do with it. I had now. The second padlock was new. A stainless steel master lock I had bought at the Bozeman Tractor Supply the previous Thursday. The third padlock was the one Cal had used on the original gate at the Tanner Cross brand entrance back in 1986, the year he had handed me the deed. 3 padlocks, 3 generations, 3 keys. I closed the gate. I stepped back. It was 5:58 a.m. We waited 2 minutes in the dark. At 6:01, Coy Driscoll looked at his watch. He looked at me. He nodded once. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the after-hours emergency line at the Park County clerk and recorder. Tess Quincy picked up on the first ring. Tess, it's Bo Tanner. Bo, I'm at my desk, ready to record. Tess, as of 6:02 a.m. on Saturday, October 12th, I am exercising my rights under Montana Code Annotated, Section 714-2622 and Section 7017-109. The permissive license granted by Calvin Bowen Tanner in 1984 on Whiskey Creek Trail is hereby revoked. The road is closed to all non-Tanner traffic, effective immediately and permanently. There was a small pause on the other end of the line. Then Tess Quincy said the 4 words I had been waiting 93 days to hear. Recorded, Mr. Tanner. Permanent. I hung up the phone. I stood at my new steel gate in the cold blue Montana dawn. The 50 homes at the end of Whiskey Creek Trail did not yet know it. But their only way out had just closed forever. Stacy McAllister drove up to the gate at 7:46 a.m. She was wearing the same Sorel boots she had worn to my porch in April. She was driving the white Lexus. Brett was in the passenger seat. They had heard about a gate from a neighbor's text message at 7:30. She got out of the Lexus. She walked to the gate. She put her hands on the bars. She pushed. The gate did not move. She pushed again. It still did not move. She turned to look at me. I was standing 6 feet behind the gate on the Tanner side. Sheriff Coy Driscoll was standing 6 feet to my left. Roy Brunsdale was standing 6 feet to my right with a leather briefcase. Russ was leaning against the bed of his pickup with a cup of coffee. Open this gate. I did not move. Open this gate right now. This is public access. Coy Driscoll stepped forward. Mrs. McAllister, this is a private road. It has been closed under Montana state law as of 6:02 this morning. I would advise you to return to your residence and contact your attorney. You small town. Ma'am, step back from the gate. She did not step back. She kicked the gate with the side of her Sorel boot. The gate did not move. She kicked it again. On the third kick, the heel separated from her boot. She did not seem to notice. She kept screaming. Brett got out of the Lexus and put his hand on her shoulder. She shook him off. By 8:30, 23 Elk Ridge residents had driven up to the gate. Most looked once, turned around, and drove back to their houses. Marjorie Pinella drove up at 9:15 in her old Subaru. She walked to the gate with a paper bag. She handed me a slice of apple pie through the bars. Bo, thank you. Marjorie, you should be at home. I am at home. This is the road home. She smiled. She drove away. At 10:05, a news van from Bozeman pulled up. A young reporter named Hadley Crispin got out with a microphone. I gave her exactly one quote. Ma'am, the road is closed. Everything else is in the public records at the Park County Courthouse. She drove to the courthouse. At 11:45, the first AG vehicle pulled in behind Stacy's Lexus. Faye Sarno stepped out in a black tactical vest with FBI letters across the back. 2 state troopers stepped out behind her. They walked around Stacy's Lexus to the gate. Stacy McAllister. What? You are under arrest. Charges include wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real property theft, bribery of a public official, embezzlement from a homeowners association, and making false statements to federal investigators. You have the right to remain silent. She did not understand the sentence the first time. She did not understand it the second time. Faye said it a third time, very slowly. The cuffs went on at 11:51 a.m. Brett McAllister was arrested in his Range Rover at 12:04, attempting to drive the 18-mile mountain trail out of the backside of Elk Ridge in flip-flops. Calvin Drayton was arrested at 1:15 at a hotel pool in Aspen by federal agents waiting at the cabana. Lester Greaves was arrested at 3:40 in Salt Lake City while picking up dry cleaning. Curtis Vetterly, the bribed county inspector, surrendered himself at 5 p.m. By 6 p.m., Whiskey Creek Trail was closed. 4 people were in federal custody, and the slow, cold Montana sun was setting over Paradise Valley. The mountains to the east, the Absarokas, turned the pale rose color they always turn in October. A red-tailed hawk circled over the south pasture. 2 of my Angus heifers lay down in the dry grass and watched the valley fill with shadow. I stood at the gate. I did not say anything. Roy Brunsdale walked up beside me. He did not say anything either. He had been my father's friend since high school. He had been mine for 35 years. We had stood together in many places: courtrooms, hospital rooms, the funeral home in Livingston the week Cal died. But I do not think either of us had ever stood quieter than we stood at that gate that evening. We watched the valley go dark. Then we drove home. Hattie had a pot roast in the oven. The federal grand jury returned a 41-count indictment on the following Tuesday. Stacy McAllister pleaded guilty to 7 counts. She got 8 years federal. Brett McAllister took 11 years for wire fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Calvin Drayton took 14 years and was ordered to pay $7.8 million in restitution. Lester Greaves got 6 years and a lifetime ban on surveying. Curtis Vetterly cooperated and got 22 months. The Elk Ridge Estates Homeowners Association was placed under court-ordered receivership for 2 years. Marjorie Pinella was elected the new president in a special election held 3 weeks after the road closure. She ran unopposed. Her first action was to drive to my ranch with another apple pie and a handwritten letter from 41 of the 50 households, apologizing for the entire affair. The legal settlement of the encroachment took 8 months. The 13 homeowners whose houses sat partially on my land negotiated, through a court-appointed mediator, a purchase price for the underlying parcels, an average of $184,000 per house. I did not enrich myself. I priced the land at the agricultural rate Holt Pemberton certified, plus a small premium for the legal trouble. Every dollar was paid. The remaining 37 households negotiated a proper recorded access easement on Whiskey Creek Trail. Annual fee, $3,500 per household. The easement was contingent on good behavior, posted speed limits, and zero interference with Tanner Cross agricultural operations. I used a portion of the proceeds to incorporate the Cal Tanner Family Ranch Defense Fund, a 501c3 nonprofit that provides free legal representation, surveying support, and easement defense to small ranches in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. The first staff member was Holt Pemberton, who took semi-retirement to run the survey desk. By the end of the first year, the fund had represented 14 ranches. By the end of the second, 41. The logo of the fund is a steel gate, open, with a black Angus cow standing in the gap, looking out at a Montana mountain range. The gate is the gate Russ built. The mountains are the Absarokas. The cow, in case anyone wonders, is real. She was the lead cow of our herd for 9 years, and we named her after my mother. The road remained closed for 46 days, while the new easements were negotiated. On the 47th morning, I unlocked the 3 padlocks, swung the gate open, and tied it back with a leather strap Cal had hung in the barn in 1971. The residents of Elk Ridge Estates drove past my ranch house that morning at the posted speed of 15 miles per hour, the way they should have been driving for 4 years. Most of them waved. Marjorie Pinella honked twice. A small boy in the back seat of a Volvo stuck his hand out the window and held a paper sign that said, "Thank you, Mr. Tanner." I waved back. Hattie waved beside me. Russ leaned against the porch rail and lifted his coffee cup to the passing Volvo. Joanna had driven back to Bozeman that morning, but she had stood on the porch with us for the first hour of cars. 3 generations of Tanners had watched 50 households of strangers drive home, properly, at the proper speed, on a road that finally belonged on a properly recorded easement. That night, on the porch in Cal's rocking chair, I finally opened the closet in our bedroom and started moving Cal's clothes, slowly, one folded shirt at a time, into a cedar chest Russ had built for me that summer. Hattie sat on the bed and watched. She did not help. She did not need to. When I was done, I closed the chest. I sat down beside Hattie. She put her hand on mine. "Bo, your father would be proud." I looked at the empty closet. The wooden hangers swung gently in the air. The closing chest had moved. The Stetson on the shelf was the only thing I had left in place. I had decided, somewhere in the long process of folding shirts, that the Stetson would stay where Cal had put it. Some things you keep because they belong where they are. Some things you keep because the man who put them there has left a small, invisible weight against the wood. And to move the hat is to acknowledge that he is not coming back to wear it. I was not yet ready to acknowledge that. I do not know that I ever will be. I said, "Hattie, I think he would be home." I do not know if I said it because I felt him there or because I wanted to. The difference, in the end, did not matter. If an HOA has ever tried to take your land, your road, or your family's legacy because they thought you were too quiet to fight back, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week's story. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a phone call made at 6:02 on a Saturday morning at a steel gate in Paradise Valley, with the last cold lift of a Montana dawn waiting on the other side, and a father, dead 8 months, finally hearing his name spoken into the official record of the county he built his life inside.
Here's the thing about Stacy McAllister. She didn't lose because Bull Tanner was angrier than her. She lost because she didn't read the deed. The predators in pastel softshells always assume that the quiet venture down the road is too small, too rural, too old to fight back. They assume that money buys land and that loud voices buy time. They are wrong about both. The Tanner family had always been on that ground for 101 years before Stacy McAllister was born. They had paid every property tax. They had walked every fence. They had buried their deed under their own pines. Bill didn't win this case because he was clever. He won because he was patient. Because his father had taught him that the land protects itself if you stand still long enough to notice. Because his attorney was ready. Because his sheriff was ready. Because a woman in the smallest house in Upridge Estate baked an apple pie and brought him the truth. The strongest men in any neighborhood are the quietest ones. They have deeds, they have receipts, they have neighbors. If an HOA has ever tried to take what your family built, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week's. Justice is patient and is usually filed at the county clerk's office.